In just 10 minutes, get the full breakdown of Michael Knowles' fiery debate with 25 LGBTQ plus activists from Jubilee's viral discussion on February 16, 2025. Tensions run high as Knowles, a staunch conservative, challenges views on same-sex marriage, transgender rights, and more. Stay till the end for the most intense moments and key takeaways. Here are the key takeaways from the debate. Takeaway 1. The definition of marriage is contested. Michael Knowles argues that marriage has always been a union between a man and a woman. He believes that marriage is not just a legal contract, but an institution built around procreation. His main point is that redefining marriage to include same-sex couples makes the term meaningless. The LGBTQ plus activists strongly disagree, arguing that marriage is a commitment between two individuals based on love and legal rights, not just procreation. One activist points out that many heterosexual couples cannot have children, yet their marriages remain valid. Knowles responds by saying infertility is an exception, whereas same-sex couples can never naturally conceive. For example, an activist challenges Knowles by saying, "Are you saying that an elderly couple who gets married is not truly married just because they cannot have children?" Knowles replies, "Their marriage still follows the traditional structure where children could be possible under normal circumstances." What do you think? Should marriage be strictly defined by history, or should it evolve with society? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 2, same-sex parenting and child well-being. Knowles argues that children do best when raised by a biological mother and father. He claims that studies show children raised by same-sex couples have worse outcomes in terms of mental health, academic performance, and overall stability. The activists challenge this, pointing out that many studies show no major difference between children raised by same-sex couples and those raised by heterosexual couples. One activist emphasizes that a loving and supportive household is what truly matters. Another brings up the fact that many children are raised by single parents, yet their families are still recognized as legitimate. For example, an activist says, "There are thousands of kids in foster care who would love a stable home. Are you saying they're better off without loving parents just because the parents happen to be gay?" Knowles counters, "The best case scenario for a child is to be raised by their biological mother and father. That's what we should encourage as a society." Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 3, the role of government in defining reality. A major part of the debate focuses on whether government recognition defines reality. Knowles argues that just because the government legally recognizes same-sex marriage does not make it real marriage. He compares it to a hypothetical situation where the government declares that humans have 3 heads. The law may say so, but it does not make it true. The activists argue that laws shape societal norms and provide rights that impact people's lives. They compare same-sex marriage laws to past laws on interracial marriage. One activist says, "At one point, the government didn't recognize interracial marriage. Did that mean it wasn't real?" Knowles responds, "Interracial marriage still involved a man and a woman, which fits the definition of marriage throughout history." For example, another activist challenges him, saying, "If laws don't shape reality, then why does it matter what the law says about marriage at all?" Knowles replies, "Because the law should reflect truth, not social trends." Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 4, transgender identity versus biological reality. Knowles argues that gender is not separate from biological sex. He insists that a person's chromosomes determine their sex and that identifying as another gender does not change reality. The activists strongly push back, saying gender is a mix of biology, identity, and social roles. One activist mentions historical examples of non-binary identities in different cultures, such as indigenous two-spirit identities. Knowles counters by saying that the term two-spirit was only coined in 1990 and does not prove that past societies accepted transgender identities in the way activists claim. For example, an activist asks Knowles, "If gender is purely biological, then why do different cultures recognize more than 2 genders?" Knowles responds, "Cultures can have different traditions, but that does not mean they change biological reality." Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 5, the debate over transgenderism in public life. Knowles claims that transgenderism should be eradicated from public life. This statement causes outrage, with activists accusing him of advocating for the removal of transgender people. Knowles clarifies that he is not calling for harm against anyone, but rather for society to stop legally and culturally recognizing transgender identities. He argues that accepting transgender identities as real leads to legal and social issues, such as men competing in women's sports or using women's restrooms. The activists counter that trans people just want to live their lives without discrimination. For example, an activist challenges him, "If you say transgenderism should be eradicated, how do you expect trans people to exist in society?" Knowles responds, "They exist as people, but the government should not recognize their gender identity if it contradicts biological sex." We're halfway through the video. Thank you for sticking with us this far. If you're enjoying it, please give us a thumbs up and share it in your WhatsApp groups. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to comment below. To see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Now let's continue with the video. Takeaway 6. Transgender women in women's spaces. Knowles argues that allowing biological males into women's spaces, such as restrooms and sports teams, puts women at a disadvantage and creates safety concerns. Activists argue that trans women are women and that banning them from women's spaces is discriminatory. For example, Knowles brings up cases where biological males have been placed in women's prisons or shelters, leading to safety issues. An activist responds, "Those are isolated incidents. Should we ban all men from leadership positions because some have committed crimes?" Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 7. The role of science in the trans debate. Knowles and the activists debate whether medical science supports gender-affirming care. The activists argue that major medical organizations, such as the American Medical Association, endorse transgender healthcare. Knowles counters that some European countries like Sweden and Finland have restricted treatments like puberty blockers due to safety concerns. For example, an activist says, "If every major medical organization supports it, why are you against it?" Knowles responds, "Medical organizations can be influenced by politics. Look at Sweden. They used to support puberty blockers, but changed their stance based on new research." Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 8. Is LGBTQ plus identity a social contagion? Knowles argues that the sharp rise in LQB plus identification among younger generations suggests it is influenced by social trends rather than just personal realization. Activists argue that more people feel safe coming out now, not that LGBTQ plus identities are spreading unnaturally. For example, Knowles points out that 30% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ plus, compared to just 3% in older generations. Activists argue, in the past, people had to hide their identities. That's why the numbers were lower. What do you think? Is the increase in LGBTQ plus identities due to social influence or better acceptance? Let us know in the comments. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 9th, Pride parades, celebration or public indecency. Knowles argues that pride parades should be banned because they often feature explicit content in public. Activists argue that pride is about celebrating identity and resisting discrimination. For example, Knowles cites an instance where two men were urinating on each other at a pride event in front of children. Activists argue that such incidents are rare and do not represent the entire movement. Now let's move to the last takeaway. Takeaway 10. Is Michael Knowles' approach effective? One conservative-leaning activist challenges Knowles, saying his approach alienates potential Republican voters. He argues that using less confrontational language could persuade more people. For example, he tells Knowles, using words like contagion makes LGBTQ plus people feel attacked. If you want to change minds, try a different approach. Knowles responds, I prefer using precise language that gets to the heart of the issue. This debate dives into some of today's most controversial topics. Let us know which arguments you found most compelling in the comments. Do you agree with Michael Knowles, or do you side more with the activists? Let's discuss. Here is a brief introduction about Michael Knowles. Michael Knowles is an American conservative political commentator, YouTuber, author, and media host. He has worked for the Daily Wire since 2016. If you enjoyed watching this video, please leave a like below and share this video in your WhatsApp groups. You can also discuss about this video by commenting below. To get more such videos in your timeline, press the subscribe button below.